Today we're going to talk about the visualization of data. And we have two kinds of data that we're going to look at. The first is called one variable data. And the second is called two variable data. When you have one variable data, it simply means that you're just looking at one of the variables. For example, I might just look at test scores and analyze some things about test scores. Whereas when it's two variable data, I might look at prices of hats. And so I'd be looking at the number of hats and the price of that many hats. So that's two variables I'm looking at. So first we're going to talk about one variable data. Anytime you have one set of data, you can always plot them on a number line. If there is one variable data, then once it's plotted, you can look at the range. The range means to take the maximum value and subtract the minimum value. And then we could also find an average or a mean. Means are known as X bar. You can also find the value in the middle, which is called a median. So once your list is put in order, you will find the number smack dab in the middle called the median, and that is denoted by MED. And last is our mode. The mode is the number that occurs the most frequently, the number or numbers. So if a number occurs 3 times in the set of data, that number would be considered the mode. If 2 different numbers occur 3 times in the data, and that's the most often, both of those are called the mode. On our two variable data, we can plot that on a XY plane. That's called a scatter plot. Simply plotting X and Y values create what is called an ordered pair, X, Y. And in that ordered pair, all of the X's are called your domain, and all of the Y's are called your range. Any relation is referred to as simply a set of ordered pairs. It is a mapping or pairing of ordered pairs. Every relation has a domain, which again are your X values, and a range, which are your Y values. All right, let's find those pieces of data for this set of data. We do not know what this set stands for, 3, -2, 5, 0, 4, -1, but it is a set of values. So first, we're going to put them in order, and I'm going to use this number line. 3 would be here, -2, 5, 0, 4, and -1. So if I list them in order, I have -2, -1, 0, 3, 4, and 5. The mean was the average of them. So it simply means, and showing my work, to take -2 plus -1 plus 0 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 and divide it by how many I have, which is 6 terms. And when I compute that mean, I get 1.5. The median would be the number in the middle. So I'm just going to start crossing off on the ends. This and this would be end and back end. Next would be the -1 and the 4. And then smack dab in the middle, I have both of these numbers, 0 and 3. So I must average the two. So it would be 0 plus 3 divided by 2 is 3 halves, which also is 1.5. Then the mode would be which occurred most frequently. Well, every item occurred once, so there is not a mode. So we're going to write NA for not applicable. We're not going to leave it blank because blank tells me you don't know what a mode is. Saying the mode is not applicable means there is not a mode. And the range is taking my maximum minus my minimum. I can see right here my max was 5 and my min was -2. So I take 5 minus a -2, which gives me 7, which means there are 7 units between my smallest and my largest piece of data. Now it says give an interpretation of each. Again, that's the sentence. So when you interpret each of these, you do not want to use the mathematical word. You want to explain it. Since we don't know what this data is about, we would explain the mean as there is a 1.5 average amongst the numbers. The median, the number in the middle of all my numbers is 1.5. There is not a mode, there is not a more frequent number used. And again, the range, there are 7 increments, units, between the smallest and the biggest number. Now, I also have attached to your OneNote a lesson on how to do this on your calculator. So you could just look at that, and it is using your stat features on your calculator. Next, it says express this data as relation R. They're just naming the relation. Again, they're just naming the set that is a bunch of ordered pairs. Then find the domain and the range. So my relation is R. So R equals, and I list it as a set of ordered pairs. So I have -2, -4, 0, -2, 2, -1, 4, 0, and 6, 4. And there's my entire set R. The domain are your X values. So you will not write D equals. The domain are my X values. So X equals a -2, a 0, a 2, a 4, and a 6. And we only list each X value once. The range are your Y values. So you will list the Y's. So Y equals a -4, a -2, a -1, a 0, and a 4. And again, if any of those numbers repeat, you just list them once, because domain is a list of your X values and range is a list of your Y values. Then it says graph the relation, which would be a display of our data. So -2, -4 would be here. 0, -2. 2, -1. 4, 0. And 6, 4. And that is what our relation R looks like graphically. Now it says make a scatter plot of the data. And again, you're going to use your calculator to do this. I have the steps on a separate PowerPoint, but I will state the steps. So first, you're going to have to put this data in your calculator. So you will press Stat, and then you will press Edit. And then we will need to clear our list. To clear a list, you go up onto the list name, so up onto L1, and hit Clear, Enter. And anytime we have the years, we're going to list them according to 2 digits or 1 digit. So this would be the year since 1900. So we would enter 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. Then on list 2, we will enter 0.6, 4, 18, 55, 69. And then our data is entered, so we will do second mode, which means to quit. And then to see our display of our data, we will do second y equals. If you choose number 1, and your cursor should be blinking on, hit enter so that it's on there. And then zoom 9, which means zoom stat. And you should get this display. On your calculator. So if you hit window, you will see our X min is at 56. Well, R started at 60, so 56 is going to be here. Our X max is 104. So out here is going to be 104. Our Y min was negative 11. Our Y max was 80. These X's stood for the year since 1900. These Y's stood for the subscribers in millions. And this whole chart was about TV cable subscribers. And you have everything listed. You have your minimum and maximum X's and what your X's stand for, your minimum and maximum Y's and what your Y's stand for, your data points for your 2 variable situation, and your title. So what scale or window range did we use to graph this? We used X's from 56 to 104 and Y's from -1 to 80 in increments of 1. Now we can go one step further and we could find the correlation to this. And that is our equation and our R. So to find your equation, you simply do stat, calculate, and then you'll choose linear regression because this looks like a line. And we get y equals 1.878x minus 120.92. And my R is 0.9599. Your correlation will always be stated to 4 decimal places. If your R did not show up, you can press Mode, scroll down till you get to Stats Diagnostics, go on to On, and hit Enter. Now this part is just talking about our window. When we press our window, we get an X min, an X max, and our scale, which means the increment we count by. We also get a Y min, a Y max, and what it's counted by. So this is just to have you think about what your window on your calculator is going to look like, what your graph is appearing as. So when we have this first one listed, our X's go from -10 to 10, counting by ones. So if we go from negative 10 to 10, counting by ones, well, it says number of tick marks on the positive side and the negative side. So negative 10 to 0 is 10 tick marks. Counting by ones, dividing it into 1, gives me 10 tick marks on the right, positive side, and it was also negative 10 to 10 is 10 tick marks on the left, divided by 1, on the negative side. Likewise, on the y-axis and the x-axis, it also goes from negative 10 to 10. So negative 10 to 0 is 10 tick marks down and 10 tick marks up. So let's try a different one. This window, my x's go from negative 4.2 to 4.2, counting by 2's. So negative 4.2 to 0 is 4.2. Counting by 2's gives me 2.1. No tick mark happens at a decimal part, only at the whole number parts. So we would eliminate the 2.1. We should see 2 tick marks on the left. And since it's 4.2 to 0, 2 tick marks on the right. Now, our y's differ. We have 15, 0 to 15 is 15 down divided by 10. That gives me 1.5. Again, I cannot have a decimal part, so this would be 1 tick mark down. And from 25 to 0 is 25. Counting by tens gives me 2.5. Well, I truncate that, no decimal part, so I would have 2 tick marks up. In other words, my scale is going to look like this. 2 to the right, 2 to the left, 1 down, and 2 up. And that's what my graph will look like. All right. The next things we're talking about are distance and midpoint, which should be a review from geometry. How distance is derived is I have point A here and point B. Point A has some x and some y coordinate. Point B has a different x and different y coordinate. So if I follow my A straight out and my B straight down, I get to this point C. Straight across brings me to the same y going across, and up and down brings me to the same x. So this is x comma 2, y comma 1. So if I use Pythagorean's theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, the difference between x1, y1 and x2, y2 is x2 minus x1. There's my a. The difference between b and c, my y, is x2 minus x2 is 0. y2 minus y1 is my b. So d squared will equal a squared plus b squared. So d squared will equal x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So if I want just the distance, not the distance squared, I have to square root both sides. So I get the distance is equivalent to the difference of my x's squared plus the difference of my y's squared, all square rooted. You're going to have to know how to compute that distance. Now, midpoint means it's in the middle. When something's in the middle, it's an average. So if I'm in the middle of point A and point B, I'm going to average my x's and average my y's. To average means to add them up and divide by 2. So my x's 1 plus x2 added together, divide by 2, and y1 plus y2 divide by 2 gives me my midpoint. Let's just try a couple of those. So if I have the distance between 2, -4 and 5, -1, I'm going to call this x1, y1. This one's x2, y2. So my distance will be the square root of the difference of my x's squared plus the difference of my y squared. Distance is difference. So my x's are 2 and -5. So I'm just going to put that in here, 2 and -5. My y's are -4 and -1. So that gives me the square root. 2 minus minus is a plus, so 2 plus 5 gives me 7 squared. -4 plus 1 gives me a -3 squared. So 7 squared is a 49, plus a -3 squared is a +9. That gives me the square root of 58. 58 is 2 times 26, which is actually 2 times 29, and both those are prime. So that does not simplify. So this is the exact value of the distance. The approximate value would be a rounded version. So if you put in your calculator square root 58, you should get about 7.62. So this is a rounded approximate answer. Anytime we want exacts, we want you to leave it in radical, simplest radical form. Now, midpoint means middle. So I'm going to average up my x's, which are 6 and 2. Add them up, divide by 2. That's 8 divided 2. That gives me 4. So it gives me an x value of 4. Then I'm going to do the same with my y's. A -2 and a -9. That gives me a -11/2. I can leave it improper as -11/2, or since it divides evenly, I could say -5.5.